So we have access to everything, and we can do everything that the big guys can't.
Welcome to episode 346 of the Community Broadband Bits podcast from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'm Lisa Gonzalez. What's it like to own and operate a local telecommunications company? This week's guest, Brent Christensen of Christensen Communications, is visiting with Christopher. In addition to discussing his experiences offering services in Greater Minnesota, Brent also talks about his role with the Minnesota Telecommunications Alliance, an advocacy group that represents the interests of companies like Christensen Communications all over the state. Brent and Chris discuss some of the advances Minnesota has made in bringing support to ISPs expanding broadband and how the Alliance has helped with those advances. They also talk about the permitting process, how railroads factor into deployment for companies like Brent's, and some of the matters that Brent, as a telecom provider, has found local governments should consider to improve chances of partnerships. Learn about Christensen Communications at chriscomco.net. Now here's Christopher with Brent Christensen of Christensen Communications.
Welcome to another episode of the Community Broadband Bits podcast. This is Chris Mitchell coming to you from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, speaking today with Brent Christensen, the president and CEO of MTA, the Minnesota Telecommunications Alliance, as well as the vice president and chief operating officer of Christensen Communications out of Medelia, Minnesota. Welcome to the show, Brent.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
I think that might be the longest title that we've had for anyone, which is a pretty good record, interviewing some government folks.
Yeah, well, they say the longer the title, the less it means, but it kind of reflects both the jobs I do.
I want to thank you for coming into our Ice Cube today. I feel like this is our Klobuchar moment of of doing our interview in an office that has lost its furnace. If you hear a hum in the background, it is a space heater that is making things tolerable in here. But it's
not bad. It's kind of comfortable.
Yeah, well, you know, it's about 55 degrees, and I don't know. I like to sleep in this weather, so I'll try to stay awake for the entirety of the interview.
Sure.
So
I'll try not to bore you too much.
So tell me about, well, for background, I just visited your office down in Medelia, Minnesota, and got a tour of what you're doing. And I'd like you to just describe a little bit the history of Christensen Communications.
We started in 1903, and we started, there were 48 people in town that got together. The Fairmont Telephone Company built lines from Fairmont to Medelia, but would just serve the city limits. And so 48 people got together and decided that wasn't good enough. They wanted to get outside of the city limits. So they started a telephone company, kind of the first CLEC, or one of the first CLECs. And they went to my great-great-grandfather, who owned the flour mill in town, and said, hey, would you buy 25% of the stock? And so he did, and that's how we got involved with it, and over the years acquired more and more of the stock until my grandfather passed away in 1982, and he had all but 5 shares, and my dad picked those up. So that's kind of it was one of those things, it could have gone either way in 1903. It could have, they could have sold stock, or they could have started a co-op. That's the way it went. I'm the 5th generation of my family to be involved with it, and we've been part of the community ever since.
And how many lines do you have?
We have about 1,100 total. We've got about 900 access lines in our ILEC in Medelia, and then we've got about 300 or 400 in our CLEC in St. James.
Great. And just for people who are newer to the show, ILEC is your incumbent territory, and CLEC is where you're a competitive carrier. You're
That's
competitive in effect everywhere now, but it's the old historic boundaries when we had a monopoly officially.
And that's on the different sides of business. So on the telephone side, our incumbent area is Medelia, our franchised area. But then on the broadband, there is no franchise area, so we can go pretty much anywhere.
So what is it like being one of the smallest telephone companies in the modern era when, you're having to look at these advanced technologies and things like that?
That's a good question. People ask that all the time. So how does a little guy like us survive? And to be honest, we don't know any other way because we've always been small. It's all partnerships. So we partner with other telephone companies. We started broadband internet in 2000. I didn't know anything about it, so we partnered with another telephone company who was already doing it or just starting it, and we have connections to the outside world through Mankato and New Ulm. We have we lease a fiber that goes all the way up to the 511 building, so we have access to everything. And we can do everything that the big guys can. We just we like to brand it ourselves sometimes if it's not our product. we get it from the phone company, but we can do anything.
And you face competition from a cable company in Madelia.
Right. Yeah. Comcast has 2 properties outside the Twin Cities Metro, and one of them happens to be in Madelia. And the irony in that is we started the cable company back in the early 80s and sold it off. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So have they gone to DOCSIS 3.1 there? Or?
Yeah, I believe they have. Yeah,
Okay.
they've taken fiber to the node, and they did that a few years ago.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I try to pay attention to, because I have a lot of criticisms of Comcast, but I also have the sense that of the big cable companies, they tend to upgrade more widely the fastest. So I'm always curious what's really happening in smaller towns.
Yeah, they're I don't know, it's been probably close to 10 years ago when they upgraded and put fiber in their network in town.
Mm-hmm.
So.
So you're also the president and CEO of MTA,
Yep.
which is not the Montana Telecom Association. It's the Minnesota Telecommunications Alliance, I believe.
Yep.
So tell me about that.
So we're the trade association that represents, and it depends on how you count them. I count them on the holding company level. So there's 44 members of MTA. They operate over 70 telephone companies throughout the state of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Right, because for instance, like Akira, I think they operate 2, right? They have
Yep.
2 different co-ops that they operate.
Acera, yeah, yes, they're 2
Acera?
separate. Acera, it's 2 separate co-ops that share staff and management.
Okay. And it's pronounced Acera, apparently.
Acera, yep.
Okay. I should
And
know
then,
that.
like Arvig has got 12 companies or so, and Nuvera's got, which used to be New Ulm Telecom, they have several. There's a lot of them.
Right. So what are your big priorities this year?
Well, our number one priority is to get funding for the border-to-border broadband grant program. That's been we didn't get funding. We got funding passed through the legislature, but it was in that mega omnibus bill that didn't get passed, so we didn't get that last session. So we're really working hard to get funding for that for this year. I don't know what it means, but the governor, the House, and the Senate all have the same numbers for the grant program. So I take that as optimistic, so I hope it is.
Which would be the highest it's been funded for any single year, I think, in the first year.
Is that
right?
They did have a $35 million grant year in like year 2 or 3.
Okay.
It is higher, but it's not unprecedented.
Okay. The grant program is it's one of the areas in which you and I agree.
Yeah.
For people who aren't familiar, Brent, and we'll talk about this later, you're not a fan of municipalities getting involved directly in this.
Yep.
And I originally helped to design this program. It changed a bit in the course of legislating it. I got the sense that you were pretty nervous about the state getting involved at the time.
Well, I wasn't a fan, and I certainly wasn't a fan in the beginning of the Office of Broadband Development. I saw it as another regulator involved in this. Our industry is unique, and I speak about the landline telephone side. Not only we're the only competitive utility, but we're regulated by the Department of Commerce, the Public Utilities Commission, the Office of Attorney General, and the FCC. Our competitors are not. So I was concerned that was going to tip into the broadband world as well, and I was wrong. They really proved that they bust down silos at the Office of Broadband Development, and they really have helped in much more ways than just the grant program.
I credit that almost entirely with Dana McKenzie.
Oh, absolutely. Dana and Diane and their staff, they do a phenomenal job, and I think there are 2 factors in there. One, that it got housed in deed and not commerce.
Right.
So it's an economic development issue now, not a regulatory issue. That's a big part of it. The other part of it is the people that they've got. Diane Wells came from the department. Well, she is an employee of the Department of Commerce assigned to OBD. She's one of the few people I've ever met in state government that understands private business. And then Dana's experience, she's a problem solver. She's interested in that, not in politics. So I haven't met anybody that doesn't fully credit them with the success of that office.
One of the things that I think Dana brought with her was more than a decade of experience with this issue.
Yes.
She had a sense of the real dynamics, having been in IT for for a very rural county in Minnesota.
Yep.
And I would just harp on this one last second to say that for other states that are looking at programs, I think the rules matter. I think where you house it in the departments matter, but finding a good person is the single most important thing.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself. I absolutely agree. She has not only she serves on the FCC's BDAC, Broadband Development Advisory Committee, but she has also worked with a number of other states to replicate what we do here in Minnesota. And I've had the opportunity to do that too. And I tell them exactly what you just said.
Mm-hmm. And one of the other things that I think is important, which I suspect you'll agree with, is that one of the best things about Minnesota's program, the way it's designed, is that it doesn't really have a high overhead. Almost all the money that's appropriated goes toward better networks.
Absolutely. That was another big thing. You know, when you start, government never goes away. It only gets bigger. I've never seen an exception to that until OBD.
Well, I would disagree with you on that, but we're not going to go down that pipe.
Darn it, we're on a roll. Shoot. But they absolutely, that's absolutely true. They have not gotten any bigger. They've found their niche. They do it really, really well. And they do so much more than just the grant program. I'll give you an example. We had a problem with MnDOT in the permitting process that it took to get right-of-way permits to deploy fiber.
Sure. And
it was taking a long time. It was taking, up to 12, 16 weeks. And we have a very short construction season, so, we're trying to get this out. Well, they facilitated through Deeds. Deeds got a one-stop business shop where they get all the players together, they sit down, and we've cut that time almost in half. It still has a ways to go compared to our neighboring states, but we're cutting that down. And they did that.
One of the things that I learned on my tour that I thought was really interesting as a lesson learned, Mike Den, one of your technical guys, he said that a lesson you've learned is it's better to go down thinly populated roads, like really just township roads, as opposed to the bigger MnDOT roads.
Yeah. The permitting is so much easier when you do it that way. And a lot of times you just go pay $100 to the county and you're done and you got it and you can go. That's not the case when you're at MnDOT. And we're going to talk later about railroads. That's really not the case for the railroads. It's easier to do that, and it's cheaper, and we can deploy faster.
Sure.
Because we have such a short construction season.
Last year in particular.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was talking to some of the one of our listeners runs U.S. Internet, and and I think he was saying it was the shortest construction season they've had since they started doing fiber.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had early snows, we had late snows, and actually, I was just looking at some photos from last year, photos of me building a big snow tunnel with my son in the middle of April. And 10 days later, shooting a baseball game with green grass and blue skies.
Yep.
So
Yep.
Pretty quick turnaround there.
Absolutely.
So railroads, you mentioned that. This is something that I've long been frustrated with. Whenever I talk to people about the real challenges of deployment, they'll say to me things like, dig once is nice, but let's deal with the railroads and a few other issues. So I just learned from you that states have more authority to deal with this than I thought they did.
Yeah, we had a real bad problem for a number of years with it, with railroads. And the problem was they were charging us fees to even be in public right-of-ways. And then they were charging some exorbitant and then a lot of times ongoing fees. I'll give you an example. We had a case in the Garden Valley Technologies was building fiber to City Hall in Foston, and they had about several blocks that they had to parallel the railroad right-of-way and then cross it to get to City Hall. Mm-hmm. The permits and the fees that the railroad was going to charge them came to a total of about $72,000 over 20 years. So you don't make that up in monthly service fees, and so it's it was very expensive to do that.
And when we're talking about this, does the railroad actually have to do anything? Does it incur any costs?
No. Yeah, that's the crazy part. Well, they believe they own all of it, even in the public right of way. So we were able to pass a law in 2016 that put a cap on that and put a standard fee for crossing a railroad right of way. And then nothing if we're in a public right-of-way, because we have just as much right to be in that public right-of-way as everybody else does. So that helps. We still have some shenanigans that are going on. We still have some problems with the railroads. They'll require flaggers and they'll to be on site, and they're holding up applications and different things like that. But we're working through those. And we get a great attorney, and he sends letters, and we just keep plugging along. And
I do hear from some ISPs that they have good relationships with railroads, so I don't want to cast too wide of a net. But some of them are really just looking to maximize their return on something that doesn't really impact them at all and is really important for the community.
Well, and their argument, and I get it, their argument is that they have to protect the integrity of their railroad, and I get that. But in this day and age, we directionally bore under railroads, and we start 50 feet on one side, go way under their stuff, and come out 50 feet on the other. So there is no impact. And the law says that they need to be compensated for the diminution in value of their property, and there isn't any. So, that's, and we've got a couple court cases in our favor, and so it is something to deal with, and it delays, and it could cause problems with deploying of the network.
And so let's get back to Christensen Communications now.
Yeah.
Tell me what your plans were before the ACAM model came out, which I believe is the Alternative Connect America Fund model.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. The ACAM came out in January of 2017. So for about 2 years before that, we had been working on a plan to go fiber to the prem. Because of our size, it isn't something we can go out and service debt on. I mean, we just can't afford to do that.
Right. I mean, can you give us like an average cost of what you expect it to hit you with?
We thought the total project would be in the $6 to $8 million range. Mm-hmm. And so the first step in that was to engineer the whole thing and say, and I told the staff, we're not putting anything in the ground that isn't part of this master plan going forward. So we're gonna do that. So we started that, and then we knew something would be happening in that realm. We didn't know exactly what. So we started that plan, and we were 1 year into it. We were working on the businesses on Main Street first. In 2016, we had a fire that took out a big chunk of our Main Street. So that kind of shifted our plans as they rebuilt. We were going to build the south side first and then the north side of Main Street. Now, fire was on the north side of Main Street, so
Sure.
We're building over there. So we did that the first year, and then put in some big fibers to move out of town, and we were building that out. Well, ACAM came along, and so we had to make a commitment that we would build out in the rural areas to certain standards. Some of them were 25.3, some were to 10.1, and then there were actually some that were also 4.1.
Just for pausing for a second, and that's based on a model that the FCC uses based on reasonableness of cost to make sure those people have something.
Yes, right? Yes. So we took a look at that and decided that would accelerate and define where we were going to build first. So that's what we're doing. We're using the ACAM money. It's speeding up the process. I mean, it would take us probably 15 years to build it the old way, and now we can do it probably in 10. So that's our plan. And as far as building to the speeds, we're not. We're taking fiber everywhere. So, and I think most of the ACAM companies are doing that.
And you said that in Minnesota.
Yes.
Speak to that.
Yeah, in Minnesota.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you said there's 8 others in Minnesota?
No, there's 14 total.
Oh, okay.
14 companies, and it's something like $54 million a year that's coming into the state for ACAM.
Okay. So when you're planning that sort of thing, you mentioned doing the master plan and everything. You have 7 employees.
Yeah, great.
Does that mean some people work overtime? I mean, how do you make it work to take on just the normal work and then additional work with the long-term planning? That's
a really good question. We do it a couple different ways. First of all, we don't engineer it ourselves. We hire an engineer. Mike Den, who you met, is our outside plant manager. He works with them, and they did the whole master plan. And then he does the some of the smaller projects within that. We've gotten into fiber splicing, and we have our own splicing trailer, and so we have Mike and then one other tech that will handle that. Then we have a technician that he handles trouble calls, does a lot of fixed wireless work, telephone systems, that sort of thing. And we have another tech that kind of manages the network. In a small shop like ours, everybody does something, a little bit of everything. So everybody's there to help each other out. And then we got one guy that he fixes computers. And when he's not doing that, he will take trouble calls too. And they all take turns being on call. So they all share the workload. They work really, really well together. It's an incredible team. And then we have the 2 gals that run the front office. And so everybody helps everybody else out depending on what's going on. We have to use outside vendors for construction and for engineering, that sort of thing.
So what you're describing to me actually seems broadly similar to the trends I see, particularly in like Iowa, where we see some munis that have fewer than 4,000 lines. I think most of the munis are bigger than you, but they have similar issues. So anyway, whenever I'm thinking, I don't necessarily change the way I'm thinking about this, but I think you draw a significant distinction between a municipality that is directly providing service and a small company like yours.
Yes. I have to clarify because to me, they're ILEC munis and CLEC munis.
Okay.
And, in Minnesota, we used to have 2, now we have 1.
Right.
And that 1 is a member of my organization.
Right. Much like Swiftel is out in South Dakota.
Yes. Yep. So that's a different deal. Anytime you're going to CLEC, you're taking a risk. And I believe it's a lot cheaper to expand a network than it is to create a network. And so when you've seen some expansions in business cases that didn't live up to their hype and didn't work, we've seen some partnerships more at the county level than the municipal level that I think have been very successful. And I think that's the model that if a community wants to expand their broadband, I think that's the model that they need to follow. Find a partner and go for it.
What do you think? What's a model county partnership in your mind in Minnesota?
Oh, I think and this was one of the side effects of the grant program that nobody saw coming, was some of these partnerships. To me, Big Stone and Swift, they're the gold standard on this. They're built out. Other projects are still trying to find their way, and they're done. And that's.
And how did that work?
And I'm not the subject matter expert on it.
Sure.
But the county.
I didn't tell you there'd be a big test here.
The county bonded for the match for the grant. Then they loaned that money to the telephone company. In this case, it was Federated Telephone, and then they built the network. Well, they have 10 years before they have to start paying it back. So they can build up their customer base, they can build up the revenue, and then they can start paying it back. And also, the county is responsible for helping to market this and getting people on board. So, we're past the days of build it and they will come.
Right.
So
that's a real partnership.
That's a real partnership. They did that, and they did that in a span of basically 2 years from start to finish, and they're done. To me, that's the way to do it.
Sure. And so I like that model. And we've seen a number of these models in which the county is often subsidizing in some manner the expansion. I think that's entirely appropriate for essential infrastructure.
Yep.
I like it when it's a co-op. I told you when we were driving around that if you're going to partner with a small local company, I'm in favor of that too. I would encourage a right of first refusal in the event that the small local company sells to a company that is not as rooted in the community, which I think of as being a significant difference in terms of how decisions are made. And so I'm supportive of that. I'm also supportive of the ones in which you said things didn't work out. And in Minnesota, we actually have a high concentration of municipal networks that I would say didn't perform financially as expected, and yet did deliver benefits to the community as expected. And to the extent that they needed to be subsidized, Monticello is an example.
Yep.
I think the community seems at peace with it. I think the community did not want to subsidize it. They are subsidizing it. Hopefully we'll get to a point soon in which they are not. But they are delivering the benefits that they were looking for in terms of having local businesses have competitive service and things like that. And I say that just because I think the things I've said, you certainly would not agree with a lot of them. But the point I would like to discuss with you is this idea. I don't think there's always a willing partner nearby. And I think, for instance, with Big Stone and Swift, if all of the counties nearby were clamoring for that, I think it overwhelms Federated. Mm-hmm. And so I think there are extenuating circumstances in cases.
My problem with that is there is no full disclosure with the taxpayers. They're told one thing, that these networks are going to be self-sufficient. Taxpayer money will not go into this. Mm-hmm. And that didn't happen. And then when they defaulted on the bonds, that adversely affected the community.
Sorry, just to be clear, I think we're talking about there's one community that defaulted on the bonds, and that's Monticello.
Monticello, yep.
Right, and
yep.
I think that's really frustrating. And actually, there's repercussions not so much for Monticello, but that nobody can really sell revenue bonds that are not backed by the full faith and credit now to build these networks. And so, I agree with you that did not work out as expected. But I want to offer a little bit of context.
Yeah, and I think that's and it's also scared off a lot of communities too.
Yes.
Let's look at Annandale. I mean, Annandale, they wanted a fiber to the prem solution. Well, I have not found a single customer that cares how they get their internet. They only care that they get their internet. And so there was a provider, a cable company, that said, we'll do a hybrid fiber coax network. And that wasn't good enough for them. So they tried to get a carve-out from the grant program, wasn't successful, ended up with a hybrid fiber coax network, and now they've got all the internet they can use.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know as much of the details as to how that wrapped up. If I was in Annandale, my concern would be that they still don't have the high upload speeds that they would want for certain businesses, and that sort of a thing.
Well, businesses can get, I mean, everybody that I know, if a business has a need and wants it, they can get it. They can get fiber because there's fiber to the node there. So getting fiber to the customers that specifically need it, we do that all the time.
No, that's true. And let me just say that I think there's a difference between the way that you would do it. If a business in Medelia said, we need fiber to us, and you were, let's say, a half mile away, I don't think you would charge them $25,000 up front and $1,500 a month ongoing. Maybe I'm wrong. That's the sort of prices we see, and that's even a low price that I've seen from the largest cable company in the United States.
Well, we do charge an aid to construction on that stuff because you got to be able to pay for it. I mean, you can't reinvest in your network if you're not generating revenue. So we do charge. We had an example. We had a tower outside our exchange that wanted fiber to it. And I can't remember what the aid to construction was, but it was probably $10,000, $8 to $10,000 for us to bury to them, and they paid it. Now they paid the regular monthly fees after that, and that wasn't anywhere near $1,500. But yeah, there is an aid to construction on some of those bigger builds.
Right.
We're looking at another one now in St. James where they're building to their park, and we're talking to the city about what it's going, how we're going to get the fiber out there. I mean, and that's going to be a spendy one too. So there's going to have to be, some sort of help with the city in a partnership. Those things happen, but the bottom line was the consumers got the level of service that they need, and now everybody's happy. So I think there has to be in Annandale. Yeah, I think there has to be meaningful conversation. You get sold that. It has to be fiber. Well, it'd be great to have fiber, but some places you can't afford to put the fiber in. We're seeing fixed wireless working. We've replaced a lot of the original fixed wireless stuff that we have in rural Watonwan County, and we've replaced it with some of the stuff that I was showing you. We're getting 30, 40, 50 meg out of that stuff. It's crazy.
Right. No, fixed wireless has come a long way, and in a lot of applications, it works well. I'm on the record as being deeply concerned about its ability to serve as universal connection.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Because, we're talking more than just from the antenna to the customer. That's the easy part. That's where the speeds are great. It's the backhaul. And if you don't get the backhaul right...
Or the customer lives on the wrong side of the hill.
Right. But in those cases, we're finding that we're taking the extra time to put that antenna in the right place.
Sure.
It's not we don't just slap them up on the side of the building and go on.
But you and I both know that there's some providers who are WISPs who are not doing that. You actually said it before I did. You said the exact same words. There's this thing called WISP, but there's really two separate groups that are, I would say, perhaps even roughly equal in size. Those who are doing it right and those who aren't. Yeah.
Those who are trying to get it up there down and dirty and trying to, they don't care. They just get a signal and go. And then you have the ones that are engineering it and they're doing it right. And we're trying really hard not to have service calls. And that's right. that's the goal.
Well, that's what you get from a company that has more than 100 years of operating experience. You worry about the capital costs, but you really worry about the operating costs.
Well, and then the other part of it is when you only have 7 employees and they know where your office is and they know where your house is.
Right.
We got to put decent stuff up in here, or they're going to come into my office and yell.
Now, you said something about sort of, some people call it like a fiber fetish. I understand that you're frustrated with perhaps non-technical people just latching onto this idea. And I probably even frustrated people like me who I would say I have good reasons for promoting that. Nonetheless, you like the provision of the Minnesota grant program that requires effectively fiber or very high capacity wireless. The 100, it has to be scalable to 100 megabit provision. You think that's a smart provision? Right?
I do, and the reason I do is because we get an argument from legislators and others that say this is just throwing money away at temporary solutions, and it's not. And because of that scalability requirement, we're not throwing away money, and it makes sense, and we're using taxpayer money, general fund money. There needs to be some accountability for it. It needs to be put out for stuff that's going to be there and last. And it was really smart that they allow for middle mile projects too, because that allows the fixed wireless to work, and you get some decent backhaul out of the deal. So I think that's an important provision.
And so one last issue around munis as we come to the end of our time, and that's, what do you think about munis in which they put in fiber to lease, or in which they're building a network in which it's available and they're not offering services directly?
I started out as a combination technician, and I worked in our central office and stuff. I honestly don't know how that would work. Nobody's been able to explain how you can have multiple providers jump on and off a network like that. So I think once I'd have a better understanding if somebody could explain to me how that would actually work. I get putting duct out there and making that available to anybody that wants to put it in. Then it's like we talked about on Friday. The problem with that is, getting on and off that duct, because that's not always where you need to be on and off.
Right. You don't have the right handholds.
You don't have the right handholds in the right spot, and then you end up having to backtrack, and that costs more than putting in yourself. But sharing a fiber or jumping on an existing fiber that's lit, I don't get it. I don't know how that works. So
or in this case, could be dark also. And so I'm curious about cases of would dark fiber be just sort of similar to what you were saying about the duct then?
Yeah, depending on where you go. Now, if you're using it for backhaul, we lease dark fiber from other companies to get like to the 511 building and things like that. That makes sense, But I don't know how to visualize that.
Well, hopefully we'll spell it out and
answer
those sorts of questions.
I would be interested. I'm interested in seeing it if there's an application.
But I actually think it's really valuable to have a sense of you as an ISP saying, I don't really understand how that would work, because that's something that local governments need to know if they're going to think about this. Just making sure they're talking to someone like you if they're expecting you to use it.
And let's be honest. The fault that we have on our side is that we have a set expectation, or we know how the business works. But the days of doing the traditional models, we have to be a lot more creative. I think those days are slowly going away. So we have to, particularly a small company like mine, we've got to look at new partnerships. And I had after you left on Friday, I had a meeting with the IT folks from Blue Earth County. And they're interested in doing something in Blue Earth County. And they brought in their map, and they brought in a list of all the providers who are around them. And I looked at that list, and they're all people that I work with today. We own transport groups together, and we do business in many different ways. And so it makes sense to sit down and say, okay, what can we do? Maybe I take a piece of Blue Earth County that I wasn't going to build in before, and the county helps us out and figures out a way through a broadband grant or whatever to do that. I think there have to be creative solutions to solving this problem. One thing we all have in common is we want broadband everywhere. We know we have to have that. We also do economic development for the eastern half of Watonwan County, and we're done chasing 200 job factories. We're going after telecommuting jobs 1 and 2 at a time all the time. And we bring in a doctor or a superintendent. They bring a spouse who can telecommute and bring their job. We win.
Your county is also one of the ones in which I see you're imprisoning young people on snowy days.
Yeah, and if I was still on the school board, we'd have a conversation about that, because there's some other districts that dialed it in. They're learning from home. They call it an alternative learning day.
Right. No, I was just thinking of the snowstorm we had and the blizzard conditions with the wind and everything. And Watonwan County was one of the places where people got stuck.
Yeah, they did. We had over 50 people that were stuck in Medelia this weekend, and I was stuck on my farm. I couldn't get into town. Yeah.
Well, I think that's we started with the cold of Minnesota. We'll end with the cold of Minnesota. I love this place. You lived in Texas for a while.
I did.
I'm glad you came back.
I am too. My wife was born and raised there, and she likes to have one good blizzard. So we had to stay at the farm and get snowed in once a year, and she's done now.
Yeah.
So
I'm waiting for March. June.
Yeah, June.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in, Brent.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Chris.
That was Christopher with Brent Christensen of Christensen Communications. We have transcripts for this and other podcasts available at muninetworks.org/broadbandbits. Email us at podcast@muninetworks.org with your ideas for the show. Follow Chris on Twitter. His handle is @CommunityNets. Follow muninetworks.org stories on Twitter. The handle is @muninetworks. Subscribe to this podcast and the other podcasts from ILSR, Building Local Power, and the Local Energy Rules podcast. You can access them wherever you get your podcasts. Don't miss out on important research from all of our initiatives. Subscribe to our monthly newsletter at ilsr.org, and while you're there, please take a moment to donate. Follow us on Instagram. We're ILSR74. Thank you to Arnie Huseby for the song Warm Duck Shuffle, licensed through Creative Commons, and thank you for listening to episode 346 of the Community Broadband Bits podcast.